The United States Marine Corps is a branch of the United States Armed Forces responsible for providing power projection, using the mobility of the United States Navy to, by congressional mandate, rapidly deliver combined arms task forces on land, at sea and in the air. The U.S. Marine Corps is one of the 4 armed service branches in the U.S. Department of Defense and one of the 7 uniformed services of the United States. The current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the highest-ranking military officer in the U.S. Armed Forces, is a Marine Corps general. The Marine Corps has been a component of the U.S. Department of the Navy since 1834, working closely with naval forces for training, transportation, and logistics. The USMC operates posts on land and aboard seagoing amphibious warfare ships around the world, and several of the Marines' tactical aviation squadrons, primarily Marine fighter attack squadrons, are also embedded in Navy carrier air wings and operate from the Navy's nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. 2 battalions of Continental Marines were formed on 10 November 1775 in Philadelphia as a service branch of infantry troops capable of fighting for independence both at sea and on shore. The role of the Corps has since grown and evolved, expanding to aerial warfare and earning popular titles such as America's 3rd Air Force and 2nd Land Army. The United States Marine Corps has distinguished itself as it has served in the majority of American wars and armed conflicts, from its inception to the modern era, and attained prominence in the 20th century when its theories and practices of amphibious warfare proved prescient and ultimately formed the cornerstone of the Pacific theater of World War II. By the mid-20th century, the U.S. Marine Corps had become a major theorist and the dominant practitioner of amphibious warfare. Its ability to rapidly respond on short notice to expeditionary crises gives it a strong role in the implementation and execution of American foreign policy. The USMC has around 194,000 active duty members and just under 40,000 reserve Marines as of 2010. It is the smallest of the U.S. Armed Forces within the U.S. DoD mission. The USMC serves as an expeditionary force in readiness, as outlined in 10 U.S.C. 5063 and as originally introduced under the National Security Act of 1947, it has 3 primary areas of responsibility: the seizure or defense of advanced naval bases and other land operations to support naval campaigns, the development of tactics, technique, and equipment used by amphibious landing forces in coordination with the Army and Air Force, and such other duties as the President may direct. This last clause, while seemingly redundant given the President's position as Commander-in-Chief, is a codification of the expeditionary responsibilities of the Marine Corps. It derives from similar language in the Congressional Acts for the Better Organization of the Marine Corps of 1834, and establishing and organizing a Marine Corps of 1798. In 1951, the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee called the clause one of the most important statutory and traditional functions of the Marine Corps. It noted that the Corps has more often than not performed actions of a non-naval nature, including its famous actions in Tripoli, the War of 1812, Chapultepec, and numerous counterinsurgency and occupational duties, World War I, and the Korean War. While these actions are not accurately described as support of naval campaigns nor as amphibious warfare, their common thread is that they are of an expeditionary nature, using the mobility of the Navy to provide timely intervention in foreign affairs on behalf of American interests. In addition to its primary duties, the Marine Corps conducts visit, board, search, and seizure operations, as well as missions in direct support of the White House and the State Department. The Marine Band, dubbed the President's Own by Thomas Jefferson, provides music for state functions at the White House. Marines from ceremonial companies A and B, quartered in Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., guard presidential retreats, including Camp David, and the Marines of the Executive Flight Detachment of HMX-1 provide helicopter transport to the President and Vice President, with the call signs Marine 1 and Marine 2, respectively. By authority of the 1946 Foreign Service Act, the Marine Security Guards of the Marine Embassy Security Command provide security for American embassies, legations, and consulates at more than 140 posts worldwide. The relationship between the Department of State and the U.S. Marine Corps is nearly as old as the Corps itself. For over 200 years, Marines have served at the request of various Secretaries of State. After World War II, an alert, disciplined force was needed to protect American embassies, consulates, and legations throughout the world. In 1947, a proposal was made that the Department of War furnish Marine Corps personnel for Foreign Service Guard duty under the provisions of the Foreign Service Act of 1946. A formal memorandum of agreement was signed between the Department of State and the Secretary of the Navy on December 15, 1948, and 83 Marines were deployed to overseas missions. During the first year of the MSG program, 36 detachments were deployed worldwide. Historical mission: the Marine Corps was founded to serve as an infantry unit aboard naval vessels and was responsible for the security of the ship and its crew by conducting offensive and defensive combat during boarding actions and defending the ship's officers from mutiny. To the latter end, their quarters on ship were often strategically positioned between the officers' quarters and the rest of the vessel. Continental Marines manned raiding parties, both at sea and ashore. America's first amphibious assault landing occurred early in the Revolutionary War on 3 March 1776 as the Marines gained control of Fort Montague and Fort Nassau, a British ammunition depot and naval port in New Providence, the Bahamas. The role of the Marine Corps has expanded significantly since then, as the importance of its original naval mission declined with changing naval warfare doctrine and the professionalization of the naval service. The Corps adapted by focusing on formerly secondary missions ashore. The advanced base doctrine of the early 20th century codified their combat duties ashore, outlining the use of Marines in the seizure of bases and other duties on land to support naval campaigns. Throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries, Marine detachments served aboard Navy cruisers, battleships and carriers. Marine detachments served their traditional duties as ship's landing force, manning the ship's weapons and providing shipboard security. Marine detachments were augmented by members of the ship's company for landing parties, such as in the First Sumatran Expedition of 1832, and continuing in the Caribbean and Mexican campaigns of the early 20th centuries. Marines would develop tactics and techniques of amphibious assault on defended coastlines in time for use in World War II. During World War II, Marines continued to serve on capital ships. They often were assigned to man anti-aircraft batteries. When gun cruisers were retired by the 1960s, the remaining Marine detachments were only seen on battleships and carriers. Its original mission of providing shipboard security finally ended in the 1990s as the battleships were retired and nuclear weapons were withdrawn from deployment on aircraft carriers. Capabilities: the Marine Corps fulfills a vital role in national security as an amphibious, expeditionary, air-ground combined arms task force. Capable of forcible entry from the air, land, and sea. It is capable of asymmetric warfare with conventional, irregular, and hybrid forces. While the Marine Corps does not employ any unique combat arms, as a force it can rapidly deploy a combined arms task force to almost anywhere in the world within days. The basic structure for all deployed units is a Marine air-ground task force that integrates a ground combat element, an aviation combat element, and a logistics combat element under a common command element. While the creation of joint commands under the Goldwater-Nichols Act has improved inter-service coordination between each branch, the Corps' ability to permanently maintain integrated multi-element task forces under a single command provides a smoother implementation of combined arms warfare principles. The close integration of disparate Marine units stems from an organizational culture centered around the infantry. Every other Marine capability exists to support the infantry. Unlike some Western militaries, the Corps remained conservative against theories proclaiming the ability of new weapons to win wars independently. For example, Marine aviation has always been focused on close air support and has remained largely uninfluenced by air power theories proclaiming that strategic bombing can single-handedly win wars. This focus on the infantry is matched with the doctrine of every Marine is a rifleman, a focus of Commandant Alfred M. Gray, Jr., emphasizing the infantry combat abilities of every Marine. All Marines, regardless of military specialization, receive training as a rifleman, and all officers receive additional training as infantry platoon commanders. For example, at Wake Island, when all of the Marine aircraft were shot down, pilots continued the fight as ground officers, leading supply clerks and cooks in a final defensive effort. As a result, a large degree of initiative and autonomy is expected of junior Marines, particularly the NCOs, as compared with many other military organizations. The Marine Corps emphasizes authority and responsibility downward to a greater degree than the other military services. Flexibility of execution is implemented via an emphasis on commander's intent as a guiding principle for carrying out orders, specifying the end state but leaving open the method of execution. The amphibious assault techniques developed for World War II evolved, with the addition of air assault and maneuver warfare doctrine, into the current operational maneuver from the sea doctrine of power projection from the seas. The Marines are credited with the development of helicopter insertion doctrine and were the earliest in the American military to widely adopt maneuver warfare principles which emphasize low-level initiative and flexible execution. In light of recent warfare that has strayed from the Corps' traditional missions, it has renewed an emphasis on amphibious capabilities. The Marine Corps relies on the Navy for sea lift to provide its rapid deployment capabilities. In addition to basing a third of the Fleet Marine Force in Japan, Marine expeditionary units are typically stationed at sea. This allows the ability to function as first responders to international incidents. The United States Army maintains light infantry units capable of rapid worldwide deployment, but those units do not match the combined arms integration of a MAGTF and lack the logistics that the Navy provides. Therefore, the Marine Corps is often assigned to non-combat missions such as the evacuation of Americans from unstable countries and providing humanitarian relief during natural disasters. In larger conflicts, Marines act as a stopgap to get into and hold an area until larger units can be mobilized. The Corps performed this role in World War I and the Korean War, where Marines were the first significant combat units deployed from the United States and held the line until the country could mobilize for war. To aid rapid deployment, the maritime pre-positioning system was developed. Fleets of container ships are positioned throughout the world with enough equipment and supplies for a Marine expeditionary force to deploy for 30 days. The USMC is planning to reduce its logistical requirements and by 2025 eliminate all liquid fuel use for Marine expeditionary forces, except for highly efficient vehicles. Doctrine. Two small manuals published during the 1930s would establish USMC doctrine in two areas. The Small Wars Manual laid the framework for Marine counterinsurgency operations from Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan, while the Tentative Landing Operations Manual established the doctrine for the amphibious operations of World War II. Operational maneuver from the sea is the current doctrine of power projection.